I would like to thank my patrons supporting the channel and the creation of these videos. There is one more UI box that I left behind in the last video, which is the UI box with a selection cursor. So let's start by duplicating our UI box blue, Ctrl D, and let's rename this one UI box blue selection cursor. And let's double click it to open up in the editor. So this is our main default prefab, and to add a selection cursor we just need to select the UI box itself. Then we need to go to Makinom, UI box, then input button and select selection cursor sprite. And this will add a placeholder for our image. So if you want the cursor to be static, it's not animated, you can leave it as it is. You just need to replace, of course, the image. So I have imported already the hand pointer I'm using in the Final Fantasy tutorial, and this one is 53 by 29, so I can change here the image size, 53 by 29, and that will give us this cursor here. So remember, this is static, it will not be animated, will not be moving. So if you ever want this to be animated, then on the cursor itself, the cursor game object, you need to add another image. So let's say in this case is UI image, and let's call this one animated cursor, and from here we can add the sprite again. I will remove the ray cast, I don't want to intercept any clicks this sprite, and add the same size, 29, something like that. Then of course in the parent I can remove the image itself and change the alpha to none. That will display our sprite in the children. The reason for that is the cursor itself, it will be moving to select whichever content or buttons, like so, right? So this is the cursor game object, but the animated cursor is the one that we are going to animate to do this type of animation, like so, in and out when selecting something. Okay, so let me do Ctrl Z several times, Z0, alpha 0. Okay, now the documentation talks about having this animated using the Makinom animator controller, whatever, or the animation system itself, but I really despise having UI being animated through animator controller. So what we are going to be doing later on, when we start building menus and everything else, to use actually .twin to do this animation for us. Okay, so now that we have the selection cursor out of the way, we can start now creating our input prefabs, input buttons. So let's move on. We are going to be preparing the prefabs that we need for the UI. So if I were to open the ORK editor and go to the UI system, we see that it's asking us to populate these default UI prefabs for a button, tab button, bool input, a string, int input, and float input prefabs. So that's to use those prefabs by default when creating the UI for us. So let's start by creating here in the UI folder. We have our UI box subfolder, and let's create another folder for the UI inputs. And in here what we need to do is start in our UI environment by creating here in the canvas. Let's see, we have what is Makinom, UI box, input button, and then we have this selection of choices or options here. So as we did for the UI box, I would suggest just to have a prefab out of each of the options in case you need it in the future. So we are building here like a library of prefabs that we can reuse on other projects. So let's start by the empty button, so no content or image. We have our empty button, there is no text, there is nothing here, and that's pretty fine. So what I'm going to do is now drag this GIMP object to create a prefab out of it, and I will leave actually the name as it is, empty button. There we go. So we have our empty button. We can delete it from the hierarchy. The next we are going to build is the choice button. So let's do the same thing. Right click, Makinom, UI box, input button, and choice button text mesh pro. Okay, so after adding this button, we can see our button here and the text that we define for text mesh pro to use the font as default. At this point you could, if you wanted, to change the image for the button itself. So he's here in this component, image component. This is the place you will perhaps change from our one of our prefabs. Resources, where we put that, images, yes, here. So we have, for example, a button item, and in this case we need to change the alpha, I guess. No, it was here. No, my bad, is in the child, sorry, in the parent game object. There we go. So what we need to do is in the image where we added this game object, just remove it. Okay, so here we go. Of course it's already set as sliced, and because of the image is not of good quality, this why we see it with these little artifacts. But anyways, then we have our choice button. So let's go out into our folder and drag this game object to make a prefab out of it. Then we can delete it from the hierarchy, and let's continue with the next one, which is the choice info button. So again, Makinom, UI box, input button, and let's select choice info button text mesh pro. There we go. Once again, if you want to change the sprite, I guess you do. It's just a matter of select the proper sprite, and there we go. As well as if you want to change the color of the text, just select the right component. So in this case, the text component here, text mesh pro, and you can select the color of the font. Okay, so let's select the choice info button and let's make a prefab out of it. Once again, not here but in our inputs folder. The next one we are going to work with is the choice title button. So let's delete this one from the hierarchy, and once again, same drill, input button, and we need to select here choice title bottom text mesh pro. There we go. So it's like having a title here for let's say perhaps OK or continue, and the button itself. Once again, we can, to make everything align, select the button itself, and we have our UI sprite. So let's change the sprite once again. Select the choice title button and the right folder to move the game object and make this prefab. Now we can delete it from the hierarchy, and the next one I want to create is the choice title button fixed with. So Makinom, UI box, input button, choice title button fixed with. Boom. Okay, I will do the same for the image of the button, just to make everything the same style. There we go. Nope, not that one. Ctrl Z on the button. Ctrl Z. And also remember that for all the buttons, in the button component itself, we are using the the transition to color tint. So we every time we highlight it or move the cursor or press the button, it will change the color to the ones defined here. So probably something that you don't want or you want to tweak when having the background, an image as a background of the button, or alternatively you can change, instead of color tint, to sprite swap if you have several images or sprite for the buttons, like press image or selected image, disable image. So you can swap, select the transition to swipe, sprite swap. Okay, so let's select again the choice title button game object and drag it in the UI inputs folder to create a prefab. Did I mess up here? Probably. So let me delete this prefab. And I think what I did wrong is I created the wrong prefab. So let's Makinom UI box, input button, choice title button fix it with. Okay, so the thing is that the name is the same. Okay, my bad. So choice title button, and let's rename it to fixed with, and let's fix the image. So select the button game object, UI sprite, and let's drag our image there. Now we can safely create a prefab out of it without colliding. Let's remove the game object from the hierarchy, and the next one we are going to work with is the tab button prefab. So once again, what we need to do is to go to, or right click in the hierarchy here, Makinom, UI box, tab, and let's select the tab button, Text Mesh Pro. Again, we have several options here, so why not to create a list of those. Actually, well, this add tab stop, this is for the UI box that we covered last time, so we just need to create the tab button here. We have our nice text already. For the UI sprite, you may want to have a specific tab-like sprite there. I will add though the same image we have so far, like so. And let's create a prefab again from this tab button, like so, and remove it from the hierarchy. So now is time for the input, the bool input prefab. So this one is used for bool value inputs. Example is if we have in the options menu to mute the volume or the sound effects, or to toggle the visual, so the vertical sync and something like that. So let's do the same thing, like going to Makinom, UI box, input value in this case, and let's select toggle mesh pro. And you can see already that there is plenty of options, so we'll be creating a input for each of those. So let's click on toggle. I'm happy with it. I don't have any custom image for the toggle itself, so I will leave it like that, but I will change perhaps the name to bool input toggle to complicate things, and let's drag it to make a prefab out of it. Now we can delete it from here, and I will speed up a little bit the video so it's not so long. And again, we are going to be creating a prefab out of all these options and giving a meaningful name to each of all those. So I will continue with the int slider. Okay, now that we have our prefabs created, now it's time to assign those in the default UI prefabs in Makinom editor. So let's Ctrl Alt M to open the editor, and then we have here the slots to drag our prefabs. Okay, so for ORK Framework, it is recommended to use the choice info button as our default button prefab. So let's just drag it into the corresponding slot. Then the next one is the tab button, so we have our tab button prefab here. The next one, again, this is everything up to you for all these options that we have created. So the bool input prefab, we have the bool input toggle, I will add it here. Then we have the string input, this is the text input that we created as last. Then we have an int input, I will select the button horizontal value. And for the float, I will select the float button horizontal as well. And let's save the changes. At this point, we could go to our main scene. Let's select scenes. We have the UI environment scene that we are using right now. Let's add or click on the empty scene. For example, let's go to Window, Games Love, Makinom Scene Wizard, and we can add an ORK game starter, like so. We need to check that it will start the game, and what we can do here is go into our UI. We have the default UI box we added previously, the default UI box blue, and what we actually can do is change this UI box blue, or actually let's make a duplicate from this one. So I'll copy that one, and I'm going to change UI box blue, but in this case I'm going to use the one we created with the selection cursor. So let's drag this prefab over the UI prefab box prefab, and let's rename this one selection cursor, like so. The UI layer, we want this to be on layer 1 in this case, and let's save the settings. Next, let's go to the Start menu in the ORK Framework section, and from here we want to start the menu scene. It's going to be our empty scene. Empty scene. And from here in the new game settings, let me check. Not in the new game settings, but in the menu options there is a place where we can override the UI box to choose from. So in this case we are going to select the blue selection cursor. Okay, and let's click Save Settings. And let's close the editor for time being. Also the scene wizard, we need to add this scene into our build settings, so let's make sure that add open scenes. I will delete this empty slot here, and if we click play now, but I will exit the 2D mode, and also make sure in the ORK game starter to click Call Start Menu and hit play. And here we have our UI box with the cursor and only one option, and you can see what I talk about the color change in the button. So what we can do now is play with this cursor to be animated using .twin. So let's go into our UI boxes and select the UI box blue selection cursor. Double click to open up in our design environment here. So we need to select our animated cursor. I have already imported the .twin package from the asset store. This is the Pro version, which is handy because the Pro version versus the free one is that the Pro version comes with a handy inspector component to let you set up the animation from the inspector itself, and you don't have to code anything about it. So once again, what we want to do here is just to move this cursor to the left and come back to its original position in the X local X value. So let's let me collapse this component here so we can have more room to see what we are doing, and let's add the .twin animation. And in here what we need to set is, okay, we want to animate ourselves, also this game object. Then it's asking us what we want to do. We want to move or local move. Let's try with move, the component itself. We want to set the duration to -y to be infinite. Then for the, sorry, not the duration, let's say the duration to be 0.5 seconds, the duration of the animation, the twinning. Then for the loops we need to set it to -1, so it will loop forever, but the loop that we want to select is the yo-yo, so it will be left right left right. Then for the ease option, let's select in out quad, for example, and in the 2 this is where we want to go, so in this case it's going to be, let's say, -29 pixels. And what else, let's select autoplay here. I think we are, this is everything we needed to set up here. And of course you can also subscribe to some Unity events about the animation, which is very awesome here for this .twin component. So let's save our prefab. Let's go back to the empty scene and let me hit play. And we have our cursor, but it's not animating by default, so let's check it out. We have the UI here in the Makinom per system object. Then in the layer 1 we have our UI box, and from here we have our cursor object and then the animated cursor. And when using .NET Play, the sequence is determined by the .NET animation components or the target game object inspector. So let's select activate edit mode and commit change and restart. So there we go. So here we can see how it will look, the animation. We can play with the duration, perhaps it's too fast, 0.6. And of course you can play with the ease, type of ease, or if you wanted to move or to animate to other places as well. So yeah, I rather use .twin than the animator component. I think it's overkilling having those to animate UI, but this is something of my taste. I mean, if you want to continue using animator controller, go ahead. Anyways, let me stop play mode here, and now we can continue with the next chapter. If you want to see more, please consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Thank you very much.